So it's January and everybody's champing at the bit to get started with sowing, and I am too. And I've got quite a nice range of stuff that I'm going to start sowing through January. But bear in mind, I have a lot of grow lights, and that makes all the difference. And I really think if you don't have grow lights, stick with the advice from December and don't sow anything, and just wait until February. There might be some specific circumstances where it makes sense to do things a little bit earlier, but generally speaking, I think unless you've got grow lights, January is just not a good month to start sowing. And although you'll get things germinated, they won't really be healthy, and you won't get them any earlier than if you'd waited for another month. My November sowings though are doing quite nicely. I've got some really nice little calabrese, I've got some really nice little sprouts that are being grown for leaves. I've got some cauliflowers, and all the lettuces that I started in November, they've all been planted out now and they're growing on quite nicely. So let's talk about January. So most of what I'm going to sow are peppers and onions, and I think these are the best things because peppers are very slow growing, and onions, you know, they're not slow growing, but they take up a lot of space, and I don't have enough space for me to start everything in February, so I have to sort of schedule things through. So I'm actually using up the space that I've got in January to get things started, and then I can move them on into new growing environments later on. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to stage things through that, and you'll see a lot of that as I go through what I'm sowing. Now everything that I'm going to show you is all online. You can take copies of it. All the data around the different varieties and all of that sort of thing is all linked in the description, so there's no need to take notes if you wanted to. Yeah, everything's there. So let's take a look at what I've got. I have to keep looking down at my iPad because there's so much to keep track of. And the first thing is probably the most contentious thing on my list, which is cucumbers. So I actually do start a cucumber, a couple of cucumbers every month for the next 2 or 3 months. And that's because I've got this conservatory. I can keep it very cost effectively above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, about 10 degrees centigrade, day and night. Obviously it gets a lot warmer than that during the day. It's quite sunny. I can start those cucumbers under lights. And we don't buy cucumbers, so unless we grow them, we don't eat them. And so we're quite motivated to get some started. I'm starting Lytham, which is one of our favourites. We also do Socrates and Mini Munch and quite a few other varieties. So the next one on my list is lettuces. Now we grow a lot of lettuces. We eat salads every day. All of our family are into salads. So we need quite a lettuce production line. I've got a lot of lettuce at the moment out growing, and obviously harvesting that every week. So I've just planted some lettuces out, but this batch are basically to replace any of the overwintered lettuces that don't look very healthy in February. So I have, this basically is a batch of reserves, and I know I'll probably use about half of them, but we definitely won't use all of them. So let's just take a quick look at the varieties. So we've got Grenoble Red, kind of staple. This is one of my favourite winter lettuces. I'll grow this all through the year, apart from midsummer. I don't really like it in midsummer. Smile, this is a new one for me. I grew it in autumn, really quite liked it. Nigel from the Muddy Boots channel recommended it. It's quite a nice lettuce. Canasta is one of my absolute favourites for spring and summer and autumn. I've tried it over winter. It's not brilliant. I won't be growing it over winter again, but we're still harvesting it. It's still pretty good, and it might pull through for spring and give me a nice early crop, but just in case it doesn't, I've got a new one that I'm planting. I'm actually planting these quite late, so these are the 20th of January, and so they're almost in February, but I am obviously, as I said, doing these under lights, and that makes all the difference. Tessie, a really beautiful dark leafed lettuce, again one of our favourites. So not a huge range, just those 4, and we'll see how they go. So next are peas. Now again, we don't buy peas, and so we're really kind of champing at the bit now to get some peas. So the way we do our peas is we start them indoors on a sunny windowsill, and then they go into the polytunnel, so they grow on quite cool, fairly slow. So about probably the end of February, something like that, they'll be ready to go out, maybe even early March, and they'll go into one of our low tunnels, 3 rows, and half the low tunnel will be Oregon Sugar Pod, that's a Monash 2P, and the other one will be Sugar Snap. So, these are great early varieties to do really well with the protection of a low tunnel. And then that low tunnel will come off in sort of April time, something like that anyway, maybe early May. It really depends on the weather conditions. It's quite high, so it's sort of this high, so the peas can get a really good start. But peas don't like it too hot, so you're kind of trying to balance, the protection that you get from the low tunnel with potentially it being a little bit too warm for them. So anyway, see how those go. So next up on my root veggies, and I'm going to do 2 batches of potatoes this month. And so these are for new potatoes. Now we've got a lot of new potatoes stored in compost right now. They will last us until April basically, so the beginning of April. And so these batches that I'm doing right now need to be ready by the middle of April, which they will be, because I'm choosing Swift and Aaron Pilot, 2 fast growing varieties. I do 2 different varieties just in case there's a problem with one of them. Both of these are from saved tubers, so they're all fully chitted now and ready to go. And I do recommend that you don't go a bit overboard with potatoes, because you don't get a big harvest. So from something that you're sowing or planting now in January, the harvest will be very modest. Let's call it modest. Nothing to be proud of basically, and then the batch in February will be better, and then the batch in March will be even better, and the batch in April will be amazing. So it's that sort of sequence. Now I do have some techniques that I'm using to accelerate the growth of the potatoes, and I'll cover that in a separate video, so sort of hang on for that. But I think it's worth it, because once you've run out of new potatoes, you're really waiting for the next ones to come. And so for us, we like to have a continuity of supply all year round. Next one is radish. Now, we really like to have radishes in our salad mixes. Right now, we don't have any radish. We're using okra as that alternative, and okra are really great alternatives to radish. Similar crunchy texture, bit of bite, bit of zest to them. So now we're starting with the next batch of radish, and I will basically eat okra until about middle of March or something like that, and then we'll switch over to the radishes, this batch that will be ready by then. And we'll grow. We won't have these under lights for very long, so one of the tricks with lights basically is just to get a lot of good healthy leaf growth, and once you've got that on a nice stocky plant, they can tolerate lower light levels. The challenge is when they've got little tiny leaves and not much light, they do get very leggy very fast. But if you can just use the grow lights just for a couple of weeks, then that's kind of often enough. And you'll see that I've actually marked on the database how many days of grow lights each of these veggies is going to have, and I think that's quite a useful bit of information. So that's radishes. What I've also marked is actually when I'm expecting to harvest things, so early March basically for these radishes. So next one are 2 root veggies, and Tokyo Cross turnips, gorgeous white turnip. I've never done them quite this early, but I'm going to put them in the polytunnel, and again I'm just going to get them started with lights. I'm hoping that I'll get those in May. I might get them a little bit earlier. As I said, I've never quite done these before. My polytunnel is not heated, and so that makes a big difference. Things grow quite slowly in February, but these are going to be put out middle of February, and so they'll have good leaf hopefully by March. And by March we're starting to get a reasonable amount of sunshine, and then April is very sunny, so hopefully I'll get them. Same with bolt hardy beetroot. Now we tend to start running out of beetroot in our store in about the beginning of May, so we're really looking for beetroot at the beginning of May, and we eat beetroot pretty much every day. Bolt hardy is the best one to grow, and so we're going to try and pull off a decent crop from the polytunnel again in May, and then we'll have our early main crop basically coming in June, and then it goes. So we do a tray of beetroot every month or so. So what's next? So let's talk about brassicas. So most of your brassicas will be going to seed in May, or finishing seeding in May. And so what we need is a nice range of brassicas to fill that gap, the traditional hungry gap from May to June. Some people could do April, May to June, but it's hard for us to think of April as being the hungry gap because we just have so much food in April. But anyway, I've got a range of different brassicas. So I definitely start with spring cabbages, but those were planted back in sort of August, September last year. Those are looking really nice now. They'll be really great come the hungry gap. What we've also got are other overwintered cauliflowers and calabrese. Again, they're looking really nice. They'll be ready in May. Purple sprouting broccoli, again, ready in May. So there's plenty of stuff that I've done in the past to have a really productive May. But these are the ones that I'm looking to do in January, again, for harvest sort of May, June, July sort of time. And the first one are sprouts. Start those off under lights. They need actually probably about a month under lights, and then there'll be nice little stocky plants. Then those can go into a polytunnel, and then about March time, that's when I'll be planting those with some protection. And then, as I said, May, that's when I'll start to harvest those, and I'm harvesting those for the leaves. And I'll harvest those all the way through until about July. Then I'll take the tops off those, eat the tops of course, because sprout tops are amazing, and that stimulates the production of the actual sprouts on the stem. And we'll be eating those in sort of mid-July and August. Then we take those plants out, replant. Next one's calabrese. We grow Marathon. Again, it's a really great one for an early crop. I've got that overwintered, but what I'm also doing is just starting these now, again under lights for about 30 days, and then they'll go probably with the protection of a cold frame, and then the cold frame lid will come off in about April time, and then obviously they'll just grow on in natural conditions. And then 2 varieties of Tuscan kale, so just a standard Nero di Toscana and Nero Black Magic. I do 2 again just in case there's a problem with one of the varieties for whatever reason. They're both great early. They will probably go to seed in about July time. That's the problem when you do things too early. But by then I don't really care because I'll have my main crop kale. So these, I'm not doing very many. I'm just doing enough just to see me through that May, June, early July sort of time, when otherwise I wouldn't have any kale other than perennial kales. I don't generally at this time do any of the, say, like green curly kale or red curly kale or anything like that. I don't find that does very well early in the season, so I'll be waiting until March to do that. But this will see me through. This is a really nice range of leaves: spring cabbage, sprout leaves, calabrese leaves, and obviously the calabrese heads, purple sprouting broccoli leaves, and the purple sprouting broccoli heads flowers, and the Tuscan kales. That's a nice range of kales and other brassica leaves, isn't it? So onions. So we've got masses and masses of spring onions in the ground, but they'll be sort of finishing in about May time. So that's when we need all of our new crop spring onions to be ready. And so I'm doing 2 varieties, Stir On and North Holland Blood Red. Now I've chosen those 2 varieties specifically because they are also bulbing onions, and so it is quite nice if for whatever reason we have any failures with our bulbing onions, we've got these extras in reserve, and we might save a few and grow them on for bulbing onions if we need them. But we'll plant them at spring onion density, which at this time of year I normally do 7 seeds per module. In a couple of months I'll go up to 9 seeds per module, but I find that when light levels are low, it's just a bit much for 9 seeds per module, so I drop that down to about 7. I'm getting about 5 or 6 germinating, and that's just enough at this time of year. So onions, these are main crop onions. I'll do one batch in January and then another batch in February. I'll just do the ones in February are our favourites. So let me just quickly talk about these. So I'm doing Paris, Silver Skin, Red Baron, Bedfordshire Champion, Ailsa Craig, and then Zebrun, which is it is an onion, but tastes a bit more like a shallot. And can't read this one. What is it? Semaine, which I've never grown before, but apparently this semaine, and if you look at the image of it, you'll see it's it's a very narrow onion, and it's ideal for salads, and it's at its peak in August and September and October, which is the time I find the most difficult to get really good spring onions. So I'm going to use this as a salad onion during that period, and then I'll switch over to traditional spring onions in October, November, and all the way through for the rest of the year. So I'm quite excited to try this one because, as I said, we find that time period, August, September, October, is the most difficult time to grow really good spring onions. So let me just quickly talk about these onions. As I said, I'm going to start these under lights. I'm not going to have them under lights for very long, just enough to get them going, get a little bit of growth on them, and then I'll put them somewhere cool, like the polytunnel, and just let them grow on. They don't mind a frost or anything like that. I'm not in a massive rush. Last year I didn't do any of these onions, I don't think, in January. The reason that I'm doing them now is I'm just giving them 2 extra weeks. I found when I planted my onions out in April that a few of them just didn't have quite enough root growth, so I'm just giving them 2 extra weeks of extra root growth, really, is all I'm looking for. But there is more of a risk when you do them this early, and so as a result of that, our favourites, which are the Red Baron and the Zebrun, we're going to do another batch of those in February because we know that that's always successful. So that's the onions. Peppers. Wow, we've got quite a range of peppers here. Now, I generally find that when you're growing under lights, and we're only going to do lights for about 60 days, so we'll do intense lights for 30 days, and then we'll do less intense for another 30 days, and then we'll put them on windowsills and shelves in the conservatory for the remainder of their lives, until they get planted out. But they take up a lot of space, and so the only ones I'm going to start in January are my hot peppers, because they take up less space, and my earlies, and I'll talk about that in a minute, early sweet peppers. So we're doing jalapeno, hot peppers, Habanero, Hungarian hot wax, Scotch bonnet, and cayenne peppers. So they're the chili peppers that we're doing. And I'm not doing very many. We don't eat a huge number of chili peppers. We're just going to have a nice wide range. I'm going to start 3 plants of each variety now. And then obviously if I have a problem, I can start some more in February, but I'm only planning to do 3, which means I only need 2 trays, which means they're not taking up a huge amount of my grow room space. And I'm not going to put those out until middle of May at the very earliest. Now these hot peppers, they're not going in the ground, they're all going in pots. Again, so they're not, I don't have this issue of should I plant them in the ground, shouldn't plant them in the ground type of thing in May, because I'm not going to plant any of them in the ground. So they might be on the kitchen windowsill, for example, would be the most likely location for them in May. Now my sweet peppers, I'm doing California Wonder and Long Red Marconi. Had great experience with both of those last year, even though they're really boring. It doesn't really matter because they're really reliable and tasty. But I'm only doing a quarter of my sweet peppers now, and then I'll do another quarter in February, and then I'll do the remaining half in early March. And that's again because of space, because we grow 40, how many are we doing? 48, maybe even more than that. But at least 48, maybe 60 sweet peppers this year. And that is a lot, you know, you can imagine the amount of space that's going to take up once they're all potted on in May. Basically, this conservatory is going to be full of peppers, and the kitchen's going to be full of peppers. So it's just too much if they're all in big pots. So what I want 12 in big pots, 12 in medium, and then 12 in medium-sized pots, and then the rest in relatively small pots. And that way I can actually cope with the volumes. And it's fine, because when you do it that way, you get some nice early ones. So we generally start, what have I got harvested? Late June is when we get our first harvest. We don't get a huge number of those, but we get, you know, enough to get started with. We don't get enough for preserving, for example, but we get enough to eat fresh. And then, you know, in July, second batch start coming on stream, and then main crop in August. And that is at the same time as the tomatoes are really coming on stream. And so that's what we need for storage. So we got, basically the philosophy is have enough to eat fresh early, and then when we need our storage volumes, that's our main crop, we do those later. So that's the way we're doing our peppers. And that's also the way that we're doing our tomatoes. So we'll have a small number done early, although I'm not doing any in January. And that's for eating fresh. And then our main crop for storage, preserving and all that, freezing, that starts all kicking off in August and September. So that, I think, is about it. Now, some people ask me quite often about where I get my seeds from. And so I've got a link in the description that shows everything that I've just talked about, but with all the seed packet details as well. And so I'll just put a little video up just showing you what that looks like. And again, as I say, link in the description for that. So I think that is everything that I'm doing in January. And you'll notice that there's quite a few things that I'm not doing. I'm not doing leeks. I find that if I do leeks too early, they almost always go to seed, or a substantial proportion of them go to seed. And there's just no point, you know, because you're not going to eat your leeks anyway until, you know, October. Start eating them in October probably, although we do some summer leeks for a bit earlier than that. But, you know, if you're going to eat it in October, why bother starting it now? There's just no point. And so I'll start those in some summer leeks. I'll start in February, and then the winter leeks I'll start in March, and they'll be ready for planting out in May. And that's kind of perfect timing for me. And I'm not doing any tomatoes, although I will do some small early tomatoes in February, but most of my tomatoes I'll be doing in March and April. They just grow so much faster than peppers. And again, it's just a space issue, you know, for me, because I'll be growing, I don't grow a huge number of tomatoes, but at least sort of, you know, 20 or 30 or something like that. And, you know, that's a lot of space. And here, last year, we actually had a hard frost in the middle of May. So that's really put me off doing a lot of early stuff, because although I only lost, I think I lost probably a fifth of my peppers in that, which is still quite a lot. But I also I had to spend a lot of time messing around, fleecing, protecting everything, and I just can't really be bothered to do that just to get a harvest like a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier. So yes, what a ramble. Anyway, my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.